Okay, hi everyone. My name is Sanyu Guo, and today I'm going to do my outline for my final report. The title is Does Belt and Road Initiative Make Countries More Corrupt? For this research, I'm using a GIS approach. I will be using GIS, Geographic Information System, to do data visualizations and spatial autocorrelation to understand where exactly we need to focus on the corruption issues in BRI country, Belt and Road Initiative. Okay, so starting off, I'll start off by introducing a little bit about Belt and Road Initiative, BRI. So it was originally called One Belt, One Road. There's one Silk Road, which go from the land road all the way to Europe, from China to Europe, and another sea belt that will go on the sea routes from China to South Asia, Middle East, and then heading to Europe. Also going through East Africa as well. It was first mentioned in President Xi Jinping's official visits to Indonesia and Kazakhstan in 2013. But it was not until 2017 it was incorporated in the PRC's constitution. It covered 1/3 of the world's trade volumes and GDP, and also includes 60% of the world populations. The main purpose of having this kind of international organization or international big project plan is to be influential, for China to be influential, to stand up to the current American-dominated world order, as China is rising. And we can all know that through the trade war and also some of the conflicts with the United States these days. So if you look at the BRI, it is very beneficial for many countries. It helps the mega project plans. It will help all these countries to build up their own infrastructure, mainly railroads, high-speed rails, highways, and other infrastructures, which many of the countries they don't have the efficiency to do so, or they don't have the skills, the experience to do so. So it's really kind enough for China to share their expertise in this area to help all these countries to build all these infrastructures. It's expected that this kind of infrastructure for sure will shorten the travel time for goods, and also in the long run bringing what the data said 7.6 million people out of extreme poverty. I mean, it's good for these countries because maybe if they don't have the skill and like money, they can take advantage of this mega plan to develop their own country and economically, and also tied up with other countries to exchange goods and resources. So, but there are some threats of BRI, of course, mainly on the economic parts, because as many news mentioned on the media were saying that China using this, they build this infrastructure for you, but you kind of owe money to them. So you're actually so dependent on China economically, you need to pay back that money, and which many countries are already ill-financed. They can't really pay back, so they kind of have to pay back in other forms, such as renting their ports and giving special rights to China for a very long period, etc. And also some argue that this kind of plan, of course, is good for having some infrastructure building in your country. But the thing is, most of the plans are allocated to Chinese firms. So it was China who initiated this project, and they come into your country, and all the work and all the money actually goes to the Chinese firms. Of course, there will be some spillover effect, like the people living alongside this project, they can earn some money because the Chinese workers are there, and they will definitely hire some locals, but it's not as beneficial as one would think in the beginning. So another thing is these projects are sometimes lack of transparency. So it's hard to know that if what is actually happening inside during, the whole process is not that transparent after all. So it is possible that corruption can happen because you're pumping money into that country, and of course you're pumping into the construction work, but maybe some will go to the admin and government officials because they, by law, they kind of need to approve these kind of projects, so they might get some commission and some tips. So maybe that's where the corruption happens. So why does corruption matters? Of course, if someone is doing corruptions, it creates this lack of trust within society. It's not money per se, but this perception of lack of trust, inequality, unfairness, which all pointed to an unstable society. And I don't think that's very desirable. Even if the state is ruled by an authoritarian regime, an unstable society is potentially undermining their rights to rule and their effectiveness to rule. So I don't think any kind of country will want to see that. Many researchers on foreign aid points at compared to foreign development funds, look into how does it help to decrease the corruption levels. Some say yes, some say no, but there's no clear answer to this question for the text I have found out. So mostly they were unsure, or they would say no. Foreign aid doesn't really. It does depends on the country's original status. If the country is already implementing rule of law, is it already rich enough to take some action on anti-corruptions? It really depends on the original forms or original situation of the country, rather than if the aid actually can help so much. Of course, my assumption is as the country get richer, it will have more resources to do anti-corruption. It will, and if everyone get richer, assumably everyone get more education, and they will demand more for anti-corruption measures. But that's only my assumption. There's no, for the data I have found here, there's no really clear indication of whether foreign aid does help to improve corruptions. So the number I will be using, the main figure I'll be using will be corruption perception index. So this index, actually there are many index in the field that measure corruptions. This paper from 2018, it compares all the different indicators and point out CPI and CC are the most appropriate indicators. But I actually look at that paper, and you will find out that CPI and CC, they have very similar elements. They're very similar in calculation after all, but for this research, I would just use CPI to simplify, because CPI is mostly more widely used when we're talking about corruption measurement. Also for the simplicity of this research and also limited by the scale of this research. I will just fix on CPI. So before we go into the outputs, I would like to quickly introduce what is spatial autocorrelation. So using GIS, we can definitely we can paint different colors on the map and tell you that this country is more corrupt or this country is less corrupt. So for example, if you look at the cubes here, you can see let's say the red is very good. I mean, it's less corrupt, so you have higher points, and the blues are very corrupt countries, and so that they get really low score. So if you start from the left, you can see high, meaning that we'll focus on one country. If that country has have certain figures of corruption level, let's say it's really not corrupt, it's very have high integrity, and all his neighbors are also very not corrupt, then it will be categorized as high. Same for low. The tricky part will be low high. So if you look at low high, you have blue in the middle. So you have a very corrupt country in the middle, but it's surrounded by not corrupt countries. I mean, so usually this is very unusual. We'll see later, but these kind of scenario are kind of unusual for low high and high low. So high low is that you have a very less corrupt countries surrounded by a lot of corrupt countries. So that's basically spatial autocorrelation is to explain the countries and then relations with its neighbor. So that's basically what it's trying to say. So I will use this in my research. So next page, we will see the outputs. So this is 2012. So for my research, I will use 2012 and 2019. 2012 because this is kind of before BRI happened. 2019, which is the latest data I can find. So you can see here in the CPI value 2012. You can see that the country with slashes are the country who joined BRI. It's very clear and not surprising to see North America, Europe, and Australia, New Zealand, Japan are in green. Green means very good. The redder you are, the more corrupt you are. So you can see China is kind of like yellow, but it's surrounded by more orange and countries, which is not extreme. Like orange countries are more corrupted countries, which you can see from the map on the right hand side. You can see China's it's light red, so it means it's high low. So China is higher. That means China's is less corrupt than its neighbors. So that means, but we know, I mean, from our perception, China is not the least corrupted country in the world. So it means that China's neighbor are so much corrupter than China. So that's why it makes China a little bit stand out. So in 2012, that means China's neighbor are so much corrupted than China. So we need to remember this point at this point. And also you can see some of the clusters, the dark blue in Central Asia, Middle East, and East Africa. That means all these countries that connect together are very corrupt, and they kind of cluster together as a corrupt cluster. So fast forward to 2019. So we will see that on the left-hand side still is the indicator for CPI. still remain the same. We can see North America, Australia, ANZ, Europe is still very least corrupted. The corrupt places are still kind of the same, but we can see some improvements. India, it's getting least corrupt, and also some of the Southeast Asian countries are kind of improving. So we can do some comparison here. So if you look at the right-hand side, you can see the clusters. Again, you have clusters in Europe, and which means European countries are generally clustered as least corrupt countries. Africa, East Africa, again, is clustered as corrupt countries. But surprisingly, if you look at China and its surrounding country, China is no longer high-low, meaning that the country around China has improved its corruption level. So it's getting better. They are doing more on anti-corruptions, so that China does not stand out from its neighbor. The whole region is getting least corrupt. And you look at from China all the way to Europe, which is the road, the new Silk Road, only one country in Central Asia are still marked as corrupt cluster, but generally the country on the Silk Road are kind of, there's no significance of them being corrupt compared to their neighbor. It's not that they're totally clean, but they're just in comparison, they are not that corrupt compared to their neighbors. But surprisingly, Russia didn't catch up this trend. It's still more corrupt than its neighbors. That's something quite interesting, I think. Last thing about the LISA map, you can see some of the country are marked with gray. These dark gray, and these countries are mostly island country. I think this will be one of my limitations for my research, because I calculated LISA using borders, and these countries are mostly land, not connected to land. They are island countries, so there's no border that I can compare with. So that's why they are kind of marked as borderless, and I cannot include them. But if you look at their CPI level, they're quite okay. Antarctica, there's no data on Antarctica CPI value, but other places, Greenland, Iceland, New Zealand, Australia, Madagascar. That will be my limitation. Sri Lanka, that's something I have to left out for what my technical problems I cannot still solve on measuring these kind of countries. So this is the gap. So if we look at the left-hand side, the CPI value, basically what I did is I used the CPI value in 2019 to deduct the CPI value in 2012. So you can see if a country is green, that means the country is improving its CPI value. But if a country is red, that means it's decreasing. It's getting worse and worse. So if you look at the country with slashes, especially on the Silk Road countries, you can see that the slash country actually they're improving. China improved 1 to 2 points, and let's say India improved more than 3 points. Whereas Russia, it's 0. The corruption level doesn't change, so it's kind of not surprising from the previous slide that Russia is kind of being left out. Russia didn't catch up with its neighbors' improvement in anti-corruption. So if we look at the LISA map, you can see that yeah, China, India, and its Silk Road countries are kind of the clusters of improving. So yeah, so I coming back to my topic, BRI make country more corrupt? If you look at the clusters of Lisa map cluster here, I mean the preliminary answer would be no. And in fact, it's making this country less corrupt. If you count the BRI countries. So very lastly, I would like to talk about my preliminary result. No strong evidence that BRI will increase corruptions. Economic development and country's original corruption level have more connections with how you improve or will you improve. I think the original status quo of that original background of that country tells more stories. Generally, BRI country decrease their corruption level. I guess it's because that if they are getting richer, they kind of have more resource to put into anti-corruption, or they are simply getting richer, and the incentive, if everyone is getting richer, the incentive of getting education and getting education is it's easier to get education, then you demand more action from the government on anti-corruption. And also, if everyone is equally become richer, then there will be less incentive to do corruption. Maybe, I'm not really sure, but that's what I see from the numbers. So some of the potential research limitations. So as I mentioned, island countries, it's very hard for me to include for some technical reasons. Also, no provincial level data, because I mean for Europe it's okay because all the countries are kind of bordering with each other, and you kind of can see it's very easy for the system to establish clusters. But for China and for Asia, you have China, such a big country, and it's very hard to look into detail if I don't have the provincial data. Not only I cannot know if between province if they can spread. I mean, the corruption does it spread across province, and also some of the bordering the province that are situated near the borderline of another country. Does a province from a province from this country, its corruption level, does it spread to another country, even across the country's border? That could be quite interesting if I had the provincial level data, but I think it's very difficult for Transparency International to gain this data. I mean, it's already hard to get state level data, but I mean, it would be really interesting if we had the provincial data on hand to understand if this kind of micro level corruption diffusion happens. So that will be my presentation, and I welcome you to give me some feedbacks if there are any, and I will try to improve my final work. Thank you.